Hello, here's a spell. I was going to be doing a normal new What If, but I decided to do a compilation of this because I want to put out a new part to it, and it's been like 5 months since the last part of this came out from the time I'm posting this. So I wanted to do a compilation video just to get everyone caught up. If you think this is interesting, please like, share, and subscribe. Tune in next week, and let's begin this What If Asta had the Sharingan What If. Mostly because the first part I remember was mostly backstory and setup. So, let's begin. Our story starts off over 500 years ago as a portal opened up in what in a 100 years or so would be known as the Clover Kingdom Forsaken Realm. People walked out with fan-like insignias on their back, and other clans. They fled their world and all the violence. Uchihas, Senjus, Uzamakis, and any other clan you suggest putting down below. This happened sometime in between the founding of Konoha and the founding of the Uchiha and Senju clans. Didn't have at this time as much animosity between them, and many wished for peace. Those gathered together and came to this world. They would gain allies with the elves. Discover as the first generation to be born in the Clover Kingdom, that hand signs for jutsus weren't strictly necessary. They could still help, but they weren't necessary, as they intermixed with the local population. The Senjus and Uchihas would divide up territory that wasn't held by elves or humans, their unique powers giving them some leeway. The intermarrying would allow them to have magic, but weak. Weak magic mixed in with chakra and their ninjutsu. And for the sake of the series, I will be Clover Kingdom and the Naruto world run on a similar enough magic system for me to just say chakra is just kind of like the primordial form of magic. They have the same main basic elements, but they aren't attuned to one specific element. As they began spreading out, this would all come to an end, unfortunately, when the human royalty and elven royalties were gonna marry. There was an attack, and a massive battle broke out. One of the Uchihas joined the first Wizard King in the battle against him, summoning a giant Susanoo to battle against the ancient demon. Together they would slay it. The first Wizard King, despite him never knowing that name, would die in this battle, with the Uchiha surviving. Unfortunately, this would not bode well for the Uchihas and the other clans, as the Clover Kingdom would quickly begin expanding, believing themselves to be superior. A war would break out between the clans and the Clover Kingdom. They would blame the Clover Kingdom for the attack on the elves, their allies, as simply due to the Clover Kingdom's superior numbers would be driven out, forced to flee into the Grand Magic Zones, where the Clover Kingdom believed them to have died out. Now we fast forward 500 years to the modern day of the story. A woman leaves a blonde-haired boy with a scroll next to him on the doorstep of a church. As she leaves the child there, wiping away a tear, telling him to grow up nice and strong, and that maybe one day he'll actually meet the rest of his relatives. As she flees and as she goes into the woods, making sure not to get too close to any houses. As the father of the church, which also doubled as an would find the baby named Asta, and that same day. He would decide to found the Hodge Village Orphanage there, and would start taking in other children. Years would go by until there were 7. Yuno had been tasked with delivering information to another chief of a village. He was taking too long and see what was up. When he got there, he saw Yuno desperately trying to take a pendant from an older, clearly drunk man. Asta would fill with rage and run for it, kicking the man. The man would stumble back as Asta grabbed the pendant. The man would take a swing, but Asta would kick him in the nuts and just tell Yuno to run. The two boys would run and make it get to safety. Yuno would then tell Asta that what's up with his eyes? They've turned red. As with the adrenaline wearing off, Asta's eyes would simply go back to normal. Before he got home, even though we would eventually figure out how to trigger it. And with that being said, this is where the story begins. With Asta cutting wood next to the church, excitedly telling Yuno, what do you think my magic's gonna be? Do you think it's gonna be my fire, wind, or even my eyes? Or maybe some sort of all three? Maybe my magic's the ability to copy other people's magic. As he began prattling off, Yuno just simply saying, Asta, it doesn't matter what your magic's gonna be. I'm still gonna become the Wizard King. As Asta just saying, no, I am. As Yuno just chuckled. We'll just have to see who gets there first. Asta would simply smile back at him. Since today was the day they were going to be getting their grimoires. Asta, with the fact that he seemingly had multiple magic types, since they were actually chakra natures, but he didn't know that. As far as he knew, he just had 2 basic magic attributes, along with whatever his eyes were. He had figured out a couple things about them over time, one of which being, if he concentrated, he could turn them on and off, and that there seemed to be some sort of advancement of his powers. When he first awakened them, they turned red with a ring and 1 marking in his eye. Since then, he's figured out how he's been able to make it into 2 markings, and he's found that it's been much more powerful. Father also said he had a gift for Asta once he came back from the Grimoire Tower. Couldn't wait to see what that was. As Asta was excitedly chopping wood, they would grow to the Grimoire Tower like in canon. And like in canon, books would come off of the shelves in the Grimoire Tower. People would accept theirs, some very thick but small, some large but thin. Many more were accepting in between those dramatic extremes. Some were excited to see what type of magic they had. Some seemed surprised, like they were expecting flame magic, but it was explosion magic. Some looked more excited than others. But then Asta would be standing there waiting for his grimoire, but it wouldn't get there. People would look at him shocked. They would quickly start whispering to themselves, Asta can get a grimoire? That's strange. We never sensed magic from him, but he could always use fire and wind. Not great at grimoire. As people started murmuring, surprised, but their surprise would quickly fade away. When Yuno received the 4-leaf grimoire, everyone looked shocked, and their surprise over Asta quickly turned into shock over Yuno getting such a powerful and prestigious grimoire. Asta would just stand there stunned for a minute, as he walked up to Yuno congratulating him on his grimoire. As Asta would just say, looks like you have a good shot of becoming the Wizard King. As before Yuno could say anything, other people would ask him questions and congratulate him on such a powerful at getting a 4-leaf clover. Many had just thought that was a myth, and Asta would just walk away. He would just be in the forest where he would debate what to do. He didn't get grimoire. He was shocked himself. Before he just breathed in and said, you know what? This doesn't matter. Nothing's come naturally to me. I don't have any natural magic. I've had to figure out how to use my powers on my own this whole time. I will become the Wizard King! As he just looked up straighter into the sky. As he just looked up into the sky, a determined look on his face. Now, before we go on, let me just explain a couple things with Asta. First off, he still worked out, since he didn't seem to have too much magic, it was chakra, and he was able to create flame and manipulate the wind into blades, but he was never super skilled with it. He'll always need to watch out because he kept feeling exhausted after he did too many of them. So he's been working out them and his muscles this entire time in order to attempt to get stronger, and have worked, but he wasn't sure what else to do. Back to the story. Asta would be walking back home, just determined. He'll try next year. He could even try going later on today to the Grimoire Tower. See if the old man will let him just stand in the Grimoire Tower for a little while, just to see if it was possible his grimoire was like stuck on a wall or something. But as he passed by, you would see a man with chains who had chained up Yuno. He was quickly taking his grimoire. He was saying something about selling such a prized specimen. Asta would just yell, "Hey, put Yuno's grimoire down, now!" As the man would just look back at him, smirk, and what's a little punk like you gonna do? It doesn't even look like you have a grimoire yet. As Asta would just bring up his hand, making a one-handed gesture, he figured out he could use to manipulate his magic, as he just said, "Wind Slice!" As a cut of wind came out the man, his chains would come up and block it. As the chains quickly went towards Asta, he would activate his Sharingan and dodge. And as he quickly would come in for a blow, but to his surprise, the chains had grabbed him around his waist and arms, throwing him back against the wall. The man with chains would just chuckle. Some little punk like you thinks you could actually defeat me. I was once a magic knight, and with more magic power than anyone in this village. Besides maybe that Yuno guy. He seems like a real freak. But you seem to even be more of a freak. I can feel something in you, but it's not normal magic. And judging from that wind attack, you're not even that strong with whatever power you do have." As Asta just started looking despairingly. After all, this man who was standing right in front of him was more powerful. There was nothing he could do to save was basically his brother, and there was nothing he could do to defend the man. But then Yuno would just say, "He's not a loser or a freak. He's my rival." As the man with the chains chuckled, as Asta would get a determined look on his face, as he jumped up and punched the man in the gut. The man would stumble back, and Asta would just say, "Sorry for showing you my weakness, Yuno." Before Asta knew it, a dark book would appear in front of him. Asta somehow knew this was his grimoire, as it opened up a page and he reached in and grabbed a large sword. He pulled it out, as he could feel whatever power it had started coursing through him. Using this, he would jump forward as the change mage started freaking out at this kid's speed. He would quickly shoot chains at Asta, but he would cut right through him before slamming the rusty blade into the man, sending him into the wall, knocking him out. The chains binding Yuno would disappear as Yuno summoned his grimoire back. Asta was so happy to have a grimoire. Yuno would later say he was somewhat thought there may have been a little tear coming to Asta's eye, before Asta quickly started panting, as Asta and Yuno bumped fist. As then Asta would quickly yell out in pain and pass out. The next thing Asta would know, he would open his eyes in a dark, dark abyss, as a large phantasmal creature would look down on him, as he just said, "So, you're my host. Not exactly my first choice, but you will do." As Asta just yelled, "Wait, who are you? What am I? Is this some sort of illusion? What?" This large figure with horns and wings, Asta would thought looked demonic or evil, would just chuckle and say that everything will become clear in time. As Asta looked down, seeing he was standing over some sort of liquid. As Asta would simply focus his energy and burst, trying to break out of the illusion, he would as it worked. He woke up. Sister Lily, using her magic to examine Asta, would just say, "Asta, you're awake. I'm so glad." As Asta just said, "Wait, how long was I out?" Sister Lily would just look at him and say, "Oh, just an hour. Looks like you just tired yourself out and fell over." But as Asta would just look at his stomach, there was a marking that was fading on his stomach. He would question what this was. Sister Lily would probably just say, "It could be a bruise, but it's going away rapidly." As Asta would just acknowledge that, as Sister Lily would just tell him that the father's been really worried about you. And congratulations on your grimoire. As everything would rush back to Asta as soon as she said that, he would smile at her and say, "Yeah, and with that, I am going to become the next Wizard King." As she just chuckled. He had been spouting that line for years. Even though at first he said he was going to become the Wizard King and marry her, that had eventually faded. As she also told him that, "Asta, the father has something to give you." Go meeting up with the father, who seemed to be working out some of the stress about one of his children had passed out. He decided to work out some of his stress by cutting wood. As Asta would just say, "Hi, I'm back." As the father would just say, "Glad to see you up." As he would reach behind him, "I have this for you." As he handed him a scroll with a fan on it. Asta was confused. As the father just said, "This was left with you when you were left at the church. There was also a piece of paper connected with it that just said to give it to you when you got older. I decided to give it to you when you got your grimoire." As Asta just nodded. As he turned around and he was going to open it, just said, "Hey, do you know what's in this?" As the father just said, "No. It's not my place. Whoever wrote that message wanted you to read it. It was my place." As Asta decided he was going to read it in private before mentioning anything to the other members of the church. He wanted to brace himself for any of the information, instead of having Sister Lily read it to him, as he would find his favorite tree to climb. He had found that focusing his energy onto a tree, he could climb it without any issue. He didn't really think this was super unique, because as soon as he showed it to Yuno was able to learn it. Same with all of the kids at the orphanage. He just assumed he had discovered a technique that was probably super common in the capital. As he would climb the tree and read the note. The gist of the note would be this, just explaining to Asta that he wasn't dropped off because he wasn't loved. They felt that they couldn't give him a proper life, so they left him at the church. Asta would be happy to hear that. He sometimes wondered. But before that, he would be surprised by the later half. It would explain that he was a descendant of a clan called the Uchiha, due to the presence of a unique ability that his mother, the author of this scroll, had. She was unable to live with them. She was forced to seek out another place to live. That's why she couldn't leave Asta with them. But they were good people, and if he ever had a chance, she wouldn't mind Asta going to see them. There would be no instructions on how to contact them or any of that. But more interestingly, there would be a note saying that there's a good chance his magic's unusual, and that they had a slightly different power than normal people from the Clover Kingdom. And due to this unique trait of hers, it's possible Asta has it different than any modern day member of the Uchiha clan. She left more details in a box she hid underneath the demon's skull, and that Asta should investigate there if he wants more answers. We start out this what if right where we left off. Asta approaching a bit of ground pointed out by the note he received. He would unearth it, not to find too many more details about his origins. Just the fact that he has apparently extensive relatives in what the letter referred to him as a clan seems to be very interesting. All he found out was that their crest was a fan. I am changing the Uchiha's weaponry and style a little bit to fit the Black Clover setting a little bit more, since they've spent years there. The Uchiha crest is like, in Naruto, a fan with two colors, white and red. But with two swords behind them. He also found scrolls describing techniques he can use, along with multiple short swords and weapons that are labeled paper bombs and other things like that. They seem to have been manufactured spell items, or, well, enchanted paper items that exploded, along with a short sword. He would take the notes and train with them, and this would go roughly as in canon, including meeting his red-haired master, who would help teach him about swords. Asta would also figure out how to channel his chakra through a blade. He found it to be cumbersome with his large sword, but with the dagger-like sword, he managed to figure out that it worked rather well. As he learned how to extend it to create a blade, he found it to be green, and since it was in the scrolls, he assumed it may have been a new technique he based off of his master's wind sword ability. And since I don't want to take up too much time like my last video, we will jump to the Magic Knight exams. This would go pretty different to in canon. Asta would be confident with a dagger on his hip, his grimoire on the other hip, and knowing that he doesn't even have to rely on his anti-magic, which he still found suspicious since he wasn't 100% sure what it was. Sometimes he thought he heard something chuckling in his dreams, but he wasn't sure. You know, I've changed Libe and Asta's relationship just a little. As he joined the exam, the anti-magic birds would actually swarm Asta before he released a wind blast to scare them away. Focusing power to his eyes, he would be able to see everyone's mana. Unlike canon, he would see Yami and steer wide away from him. He used his Sharingan to see Yami and just saw a lot of black, dangerous-looking mana. He would decide to stay clear of him, even though he doubted he was a contestant. He would hear people whispering that was the captain of the Black Bulls, also being amazed that was apparently a captain. He would see the captains gathering and initiating the trials. Going through them real quick, Asta would fail at the broom flight challenge. But on many of the others, he would actually do fairly well. On the magic attack, he would create a ball of fire and shoot it, getting everyone's decent score. As the battle portion would begin, Seke choosing Asta since he didn't seem super strong and he was a peasant. But when Seke started talking down to Asta, Asta would get rage. He would put chakra into his eyes and activate his Sharingan, unnerving Seke. Seke would immediately start questioning his decision as he put up his defense. As he attacked Asta, Asta would simply dodge, using his Sharingan to tell where they were going, before he used chakra control to jump forward, bringing out his large sword, slamming it and breaking the defense, but not hitting Seke. As he brought out his dagger and activating his ability, streaming wind magic through his sword, giving Seke an uneven haircut in the process, before slashing his clothes, before looking at him with the Sharingan activated and just saying, as Asta would just say, should not judge one before they know their abilities. After all, if I met you in combat, you would have died very quickly. Before nearly making Seke wet himself, Asta would just walk away. Before someone actually called the match, people would be discussing the match as other matches would happen. Yunos would go exactly like in canon. All the captains would raise their hand for Yuno, like in canon. Well, Asta would there would be a few captains who were not sure. His appearance in the flight exam was abysmal, not even getting off the ground. But yet he seemed to have a good bit of magic, but yet he seems to have almost 3 abilities, which were unheard of. He was able to bring out that giant sword, produce fire, and seemingly win. They were unsure, but as the captains were thinking to themselves, Asta would start to get disheartened. He thought no one was going to choose him. But why? He didn't do that bad, he didn't think. Before Yami just raised his hand, saying, "We'll take him." Asta was happy, as things would go in canon. But Yami would actually ask Asta as soon as they met up after the exam if he knew what that power in his eyes was. Asta would just look at him and say, "It's apparently called the Sharingan. Other than that, I don't know too much." Yami would sigh and just say, "I have 2 people in my squad with that ability, and neither one have any true clue on what it is." Asta would be surprised, saying, "What? You have someone else with the Sharingan?" "Yeah, ironically, it's another kid from the Forsaken Realm." Minor correction in post-production. When I recorded this, I was under the impression that Magna was only like a year or 2 older than Asta, since he seemingly did a lot of the grunt work, but yeah, no, he's actually a few years older, so minor correction. He's also a newbie from the squad. You'll meet him once we get to him, and maybe you two can figure out what that ability is. It does give you some nice perks. As they would go to the Black Hole's hideout, and, like in canon, everything would be exploding, Vanessa would be drunk, and Magna and Luck would be trying to fight each other. Yami would tell everyone to shut up, and they would all listen to him. Some asking how he is. Charmy would say if he wants some food, and a few would ask if he picked up anyone new. Yami would just chuckle and say, "I did pick up someone new," as he brought out Asta. As they would bring him out so they can do the initiation. Magna would be doing it like in canon. Magna would get a fireball ready and saying, "We'll let you in if you manage to survive, dodge, or block it," as he threw it at him. Asta, like in canon, would figure out how to use his anti-magic sword to deflect it. Yami being shocked. "I thought this kid's magic was either fire or wind, not reflection?" As Magna, like in canon, would just manage to block it before it hit him, but also would notice a glint of red in his eye. Magna would just get back up and say, "Man, oh, that was close, you nearly got me." As Asta would activate his Sharingan, noticing that Magna too had a Sharingan and that he had activated it in order to block the attack. They would look at each other surprised, before Yami said, "Yes, Magna, it seems that he does also have that power. I expect you two to get along and figure out how to properly use it." Before Magna just said, "Yes," as they would settle in for the night, with Yami telling Magna and Asta that tomorrow he wants Magna to show Asta how to take care of the chores, and then after that they can discuss their ability. This would go like in canon, with Asta taking care of many of the chores, finding out that the house does move around and that it seems to be magic, somehow, and nearly getting eaten by the hounds. Magna chuckling at this, and says he'll show him how to not get eaten, as he activates his Sharingan, as he looks him in the eyes. Asta being shocked as their pupils start matching the Sharingan, as they calm down and start getting calm. Magna saying that that's an ability of the Sharingan. Asta nodding and saying, "I didn't realize you could use it on animals, so I just thought it was an illusion ability." Magna saying it's a little different, It's a little different. You can control the senses if you get good with it. As after they fed the dogs, Magna and Asta would talk. Magna actually didn't know anything about his ability. The closest thing he got from his grandma was that they were once part of a clan, and that his great-grandmother was apparently part of this clan. They moved to the Forsaken Realm of the Clover Kingdom, where their family maintained the ability, but greater knowledge of it was lost over the generations. Magna just knows the basics. Asta would nod and say that he was left at a church. Apparently his mother was also a part of this clan, and he actually had some scrolls. As he pulled one out and did a hand sign, bringing it out. Magna would look in shock and say, yeah, as he just explained that apparently they have the ability to access another type of power that's not directly tied to magic, and that's what Asta uses. As he stuck himself to a wall, Magna would be shocked and say, no magic ability I know can do that. As Asta said, well, apparently magic can replicate some things with chakra, while chakra is more like primal magic. As Magna would ask what makes Asta think that, and say that once he showed the kids at the orphanage, almost all of them were able to do it. Magna nodding. All he knows about chakra is what has been passed down, which is it's connected to life force and magic. Everyone has small amounts of chakra, and that it will normally people just mix it in with their magic. But it is a little different. Asta would just nod. They'd run into Noelle, where Magna would get splashed with water, as he just yelled at her, saying, show some respect for the chain of command. I'm your superior. I've been a part of the squad longer than you, and I'm higher rank. Noelle would respond, same as in canon, imagining that she had to hide the fact that she couldn't control her magic. Otherwise, they would make fun of her, and maybe they'll just kick her off the squad or something else like that. As Asta would be trying to use another technique called it was called the teleportation technique, even though it seemed to just involve fast movement. He thought that it was a weird name for the technique if it actually involved fast movement instead of actual spatial manipulation. But he would keep trying to perform it. He would actually manage to succeed, but not be able to control his distance, as he popped into some bushes by where Noelle was training. He saw her being unable to control her magic, as one blast nearly hit him. As he just said, sorry for interrupting you. Do you need... As Noelle, just in her head, just started imagining everyone making fun of her, since she's unable to control her magic. As before Asta could say anything, water would just start erupting around Asta, as this would go roughly as in canon, to where Yami threw him. He would pull out his anti-magic sword and counteract the magic and look into Noelle's eyes to put her to sleep. He would do so, and they would bring her in, and she would wake up a minute later. She remembered what happened and just imagined them all berating her. Everyone was just glad to see her up, some even asking if they can help her train. She's shocked, and Vanessa would just say, we're all misfits. If nothing else, you have probably the most magic in the place. Asta would just nod, saying that she has probably the most magic he's ever seen. Thinking back to the Magic Night exam, he had just thought Yuno's magic was abnormal for the Forsaken Realm, but when they got to the capital, he realized just how abnormal Yuno was. The captains were the only ones with mana amounts greater or at the same level as Yuno's. As he just said, yeah. Besides, most of us here don't have natural talent. I've had to work a lot just to learn what little I can, and I've never been able to beat my friend. And that we can all help you train. Nothing wrong with asking for help here. As Noelle would actually try to hold back tears of happiness that she isn't ostracized. Okay, this has been the 2 parts of What If Asta Had the Sharingan compilation that I put out so that everyone gets caught up. Next week I will be putting out a proper new part. And if you think that sounds interesting, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment. It does help the channel. And this will be Spellry, signing out. Hope you have a great day.